Now we would like to bring our program with the Fireside Chat, a discussion with people whose day job is making innovation happen. Please welcome Jason Miller, Executive Editor for Federal News Network, to the stage to moderate this session.
All right, well, I'm a big fan of being informal, so the panelists should come on up. I don't do intros, you'll know that. You'll know who they are. It's the people on stage. All right, well, first of all, let me thank Jim Cook, Austin Price, Dr. Olivia Blackman, Mike Howell, John Lee, all the folks at ACT-IAC for inviting me to do this today. As you heard, I'm Jason Miller, Federal News Network Executive Editor. Yes, Federal News Network, we have a new name. We are a network now. We used to be a radio station. Now we're a network, so we're still on 1500 AM. I like to start my panel with usually a little bit of trivia. Sometimes I do a little network trivia. Now we're doing innovation trivia. Let's get you guys going if you haven't had your coffee yet. It's also because I'm a big fan of audience participation. So call out if you know the answer. So here we go. Fast Company ranked the top innovative companies in 2019. The top 2 are from Asia. I'm not going to ask you who those are, though if you know them, you get extra credit. But for the third one is a well-known American company, and I'll say it's probably not one you would readily think of. So give me a guess. Alibaba. No, we're talking American companies. Oh, I don't remember who those the 2 Asian ones are.
Just going straight for the extra credit.
Huh?
IBM.
IBM, no. We know them. No guesses? All right, here we go. The NBA, actually, the National Basketball Association. Its streaming service grew by 63% of its subscribers. Total revenue increased by 25%. And one reason why this all is they're the most innovative company, the year-old NBA 2K League, which is an esports league, has 21 teams and streams on Twitch. If you don't know what Twitch is, ask your kids. All right, here's the next one. We know the Defense Department helped create, or we'll say make the internet, right? But did you know the government actually was behind one of those innovations that drove the internet to really what it is today? Give me a guess. What's that innovation? Most of us use it on our, that's a good one, but no. Wireless, close, that's a good one, but actually it was Apple who got that one. That's a different trivia question I have. All right, here we go. Google search engine. Now, Sergey Brin and Larry Page used a $4.5 million grant from the National Science Foundation to create the search algorithm that eventually became what we call today Google. All right, last one. According to the 2018 Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, what percentage of federal employees said creativity and innovation is rewarded by their agency? Give me a number. 30%, too low. 1%? Don't say that.
Who said that?
Who said that? 72, that's too high. One more. 55%, no, it's actually 43%. And that's actually up from 35% in 2014. Now here's what's really interesting to me. 91% of the employees who responded say they are constantly looking for ways to do their job better, meaning they're constantly looking for ways to be innovative. So while 91% are doing it, only 43% feel like they're being recognized. So now you can impress your family and friends tonight at dinner with innovation trivia. All right, so here's what we're doing today. I've asked each of the panelists to tell you real-life examples of where innovation is happening. We're not going to talk concepts or ideas. We're not going to talk about culture change, right? That's a verboten word in my world, right? But we want on-the-ground examples that we're going to create that other thing we're not mentioning. I've asked them each to be quick, 2 to 3 minutes, tell you about one thing. We're going to move on to 2 or 3 minutes on another thing, and then we'll get to audience questions. And remember, I will have the wireless mic. As you know, I'm a big Phil Donahue fan. If you remember Phil Donahue, please participate. I can ask questions all day. That is my job. They'd rather hear from you. So that being said, let me just set a real quick context for our discussion. Innovation, what does it mean when we talk about it in public service? So what did I do? I asked Google that question, and not surprisingly, I found a myriad of reports, descriptions about this concept of innovation. So we've talked about innovation in the federal government through research and development spending, like the aeronautics and space industry in the early part of the 20th century, or federally funded research and development centers. And actually, here's a fun fact that I could have used as trivia. In 1969, the height of the space race, there were 74 FFRDCs. This paper that I'm quoting from was written in 2010. At that time, there were 20 FFRDCs. I just find that just fascinating. All right, we know about GPS, Mike mentioned that. The battery in your phone or laptop, the lithium-ion battery, actually can be connected back to the Defense Department and their need for lighter batteries and the purchasing power of the government. And then there are innovation organizations. We've all heard about the Presidential Innovation Fellows, or the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, or the Procurement Innovation Lab at DHS. They're taking a look at innovation and making changes within the agency. But no matter the approach, when we talk about innovation, I think there's one thing that brings us all together, and I'm just going to quote from a 2014 IBM Center for the Business of the Government report. Innovation rarely appears in the job or title description of a public servant. Unlike staff in a private sector research lab, government employees are not tasked with developing new products to boost profits or market share. Public servants innovate as a way of solving the myriad of policy and management problems they confront daily. The urge to innovate is also born of a belief that government as a solution, a belief that government can find better ways to deliver services. Innovators share a conviction that creative problem solving, inspired improvisation, experimentation, and risk-taking in their organization are possible. And I have to be honest, that really struck me. I couldn't have written it better, and I couldn't have quoted it. I don't think I've seen it better to what the goal of innovation is in the government. And that's actually where our panel is going to come in. They're going to talk about it from the public and the private sector. I don't do intros, we're unrehearsed, so I will look at Annamaria to start from George Washington.
Sure. Annamaria Konya Tannon from George Washington University. I started the Innovation Center for the whole university to collaborate and bring people together who usually don't talk to each other. We have 10 different schools, rarely see people actually being together or reaching out outside of the school, even though we are 5 blocks from the White House, 2 blocks from the World Bank. And Judy, actually, I have to say Judy and Liv, they reached out to me, and that's how I am here, and I'm really eager to talk more about what we're doing with the government and the public sector.
So give me a quick, when we talk about innovation, we talk about what the work you're doing, one of the focus areas is partnerships. So just give me the 2 or 3 minutes on how you guys are looking at both internal and external partnerships to really drive that innovation.
So our partnership is driven for social good, how we could make a difference in our local life for others, and how we could actually scale that globally. So one of the examples, Dr. Erika Burton and Konstantin Miditz, who are my teammates sitting here, so I recommend to talk to them later, we created a course for social impact innovation. What we do, we reach out to the government and ask them, what is your biggest problem? How can we help you? So I'll give you a couple of examples. One big problem in DC, homelessness and cancer. How is this connected? What can we do better to have less homeless people because they are terminally ill and they're losing their apartments because they don't have enough money to pay the rent? So we did a very quick research. It was 1 semester. We had 6 teams of 5 from 5 different schools, undergraduates and graduates working together, came up with looking at and observing the existing system using human-centered design and using design thinking. And one of the team came up with an idea, hey guys, you have a loophole here, you are not connecting 2 departments. If you would connect those 2 directly, you would save $5.7 million annually. That was a quick 1 semester kind of innovation for the government. We do a lot like this, like teen pregnancy in District 7 and 8. We were focusing on scooters and bikes in DC. Should we get it? We shouldn't. Why not? What are the goods, what we can make with that? So I can talk about this more, but.
So the one quick follow-up question I'll offer is when you talk about that, making that connection between the 2 departments, I guess, did they make the connection?
No, we did that. So the students make the connection. They introduced each other through the students. So the students were basically the drivers. And many times you see that, even though you want the same thing, you guys don't talk, and someone needs to come in to moderate. And it happens a lot, and it's very fun when you see that connection made and they just going on their own.
All right. Amira Boland from OMB.
Sure. So I'm here today because of a project that we're working on right now called the Government Effectiveness Advanced Research Center, or GEAR Center. And this is really exciting for us because, as Jason mentioned, there's all of this energy around tackling problems the government has faced in science, technology, and defense. And something less sexy and less urgent, but equally important, is the challenges that we're facing in the management realm. So we have this amazing American innovation system that connects federal labs and federal agencies and the private sector and academia and research worlds and nonprofits. But there's less energy around solving the problems around our public sector workforce, or how the federal government connects with citizens and the public, or how we adopt technology into our business processes. And so the Gear Center can serve as this convening mechanism. And so we're working to design that now and have a competition that actually closes tomorrow. So speak more about that too.
So talk a little bit about the partnership issue, because one of the interesting things about the Gear Center, are you guys familiar with the Gear Center? Raise a hand. Yeah, most people, all right, a couple people aren't. So it's the goal is a public-private partnership to connect, if you will, it could be private sector, it could be academic, it could be anybody, to bring those ideas, those innovations to the government. And especially around like back office systems, or as Amira said, federal workforce, reskilling, upskilling. So maybe talk a little bit about that partnership issue, because one of the keys is if the government can't do it on its own anymore, and I think that's really the push from the Gear Center to bring people together with good ideas and then apply them to the government.
Sure. So I'll actually use an example from, I'm on a detail to OMB right now from GSA, where I'm on a team called the Office of Evaluation Sciences. And we're a team of behavioral economists and social psychologists that work to design behavioral interventions in federal programs to improve implementation, and then use, whenever possible, a randomized controlled trial to test whether or not that intervention had a causal impact on an outcome that you care about. And so one of the projects we were looking at was that we noticed that in federal government, people are often promoted to management positions, not necessarily because they're an amazing manager, but because they have amazing technical expertise. And that's also very similar in the tech world. And so Google had actually noticed this, because people were getting promoted there because of an amazing product development, or they were an amazing engineer, and they needed to lead an engineering team. And so they realized that they needed to double down on how they were doing their training of their managers and what elements made the best managers in kind of a lightweight but effective way. And so we were looking at a project that they had called Project Oxygen, and we wanted to apply that for federal managers. And it was really difficult because we had this team at Google that was really excited about sharing what they had learned, and we had this team in government that really wanted to use what they had learned and maybe adapt it, and it was hard for us to work together. And so a Gear Center could be a sort of neutral convening mechanism for us and government to toss, our priorities to it, and then they can help convene the right players. We ended up ultimately getting to do it, but we had to go based on exclusively what was available publicly.
And Marie, jump in.
Just one thing that we recognize many times, people speak English on a different language. I mean, if I talk to, for example, an artist, and I'm coming up with the lingo of engineering, they don't understand us. We actually recognize this in our class. So in the first 6 weeks, and it takes every time 6 weeks, people don't talk the same language, and they are frustrated. And it takes 6 weeks to learn each other's languages and talk and communicate and have the same channels, same language, same understanding. So I think it's the same with the government, private, public sector. You have to learn each other's languages and start communicating effectively. Mm-hmm.
Especially if you come to acronyms. If you don't know your acronyms, we always joked about having an acronym dictionary, but can never keep up. Jim Thompson from State.
So, wow, that's loud. My name is Jim Thompson with the State Department. I'm the Director of Innovation in the Office of Global Partnerships, so the part of the Secretary of State's office. So I do partnerships as well as innovation. And I've been at this now for about 14 years. Have led the work at USAID and pioneered it at the Department of State, worked at the White House and the National Security Council, and promulgated a best practices guide in building public-private partnerships. So I've been at this for a while, and I've seen the lexicon issues that we have between private sector and public sector. I'll tell one quick story on that. We had a partnership that we were doing at USAID with Chevron. And AID loves acronyms, like every government agency. So they were talking about their strategic objectives, which they kept referring to as their SOs. So we were partnering with Chevron in Angola to do food security work in Angola following the end of the war. And we kept talking about our SOs. Well, Esso is the name of Exxon, which is Chevron's competitor. And we kept talking about our Essos and our work with Essos, and they were like, why are you talking about our competitor? So lexicon matters, and you really have to make sure that you're all on the same page of what you're talking about. Our work at the State Department, and I'm not really going to talk about states specifically, but one of the things that we're doing is trying to bring people together. So we are very much a convening organization within the State Department. We promote things like prizes, challenges, competitions. Last year I talked to you a little bit about the hackathon that we ran called Fish Hackathon. No fish were harmed in the hackathon, don't be alarmed. But one of the things that we've realized is that we can bring people together and make them go through some design learning and come out the other end with some really tangible products. So we established a partnership accelerator that we call Boldline. It's a bit of a boot camp where we bring private sector together with public sector, and we try to build new partnerships. So one of the original Bold Lines that we ran, this partnership accelerator, brought in companies like Facebook, Johnson & Johnson, and Deloitte with their ideas. They came to us with their ideas about things that they wanted to do that could be a public-private partnership. Facebook had come to us with an idea around esports. So someone mentioned esports earlier. Thank you. We actually loved this idea. So Facebook said, look, there's a huge black space where esports is taking off all over the world, but there's places in the world where people don't know it or don't have the technology. And we really want to build a learning academy to train people on this. And we said, wow, that sounds like jobs. That sounds like economic opportunity. That sounds like something we would be wanting to do ourselves. So Facebook ran into some issues this past year. You may have seen some of those issues. So they've kind of pulled back from the project, but we ran ahead with it. We actually did it on our own, and we established our own e-gaming program in the Middle East. And we're looking to expand it. So just one of the things that we love to take in ideas from the private sector, because some of the best innovation that we see out there is not going to come from government, it's going to come from outside government. So we need to figure out a way to bring government, to be open government, and to allow ideas to come in.
So the one thing that occurs to me as you're going through this is, how do you pick your partners? Because you've been doing this now, I think you said 14 years.
14 years.
The technology companies have changed, the technologies obviously have changed, but it's easy to say, well, we want to work with big company X, but sometimes it's the small company or the medium company that actually provides that innovation. Maybe just talk briefly about that partnership piece.
I'd love to, thank you. So one of the things that we love to do is bring in new companies and new ideas from the small startups. So this past December, we ran a partnership accelerator focused on countering propaganda abroad. We're the State Department, we do abroad. We put out a call on challenge.gov, and then we marketed it heavily. We actually worked with ACT-IACT to help us find some mentors. And we brought in 9 great technology startups, for the most part, to work together to see if their small technology innovations could be used in a platform that we have developed to counter propaganda abroad. So all 9, I believe, were accepted into our test bed. This is through our Global Engagement Center at the State Department, so that they could be then utilized as we have issues come up abroad on propaganda.
Look at that, you did that without even an OTA.
Absolutely, you don't need other transactions. We have it, but we don't.
Mike Howell got my joke. Thank you, Mike. Dan from the Ponderosa Management Group.
I'm coming from the industry side of the house. Many years ago, I acquired technology for the Air Force on a global basis, and then I went into the commercial sector and ran such things as all of Dell's global strategic alliances, and for the last 6 years, I've been involved with investing in next generation technologies. With my cohort in crime out there, Dave Erie from CIT, we learned some very interesting things in this area of innovation. And for those of you that are familiar with the technology model called Crossing the Chasm, one of the things we think about very hard in this innovation within government is government technically or usually thinks about mission. Commercial thinks about scaling and revenue. There is a chasm that exists between the two. Entrepreneurial ideas come out of that center section. And how do you get money that moves to that area that sustains an early stage, cool technology that will interest an investor on the backside that will then end up in a commercial entity to which the government can buy commercial product. That is a very, very hard job, and there are very few people doing it. Dave has been doing it at CIT. I was involved with the Innova Personal Accelerator. I sit on the driving board there. I also sit on the board for Smart Cities, and we're looking at technology. We're not solving specific problems, but the question we ask to the government, or the government asks of us is, and I'll use one example, man, we have a really, really big problem with our first responders. When they get on site, they do not have the tactical information necessary for them to respond immediately to the problem. This is a real world problem. And so they came to the intermediary group and they said, can you help us find some companies and technologies that are addressing this problem? We went out with a call for innovation. We came up with several of them, and one of them that we were involved with, and Dave has been involved with DHS specifically, is a company that looked at the issue and said, simplistically, what is the common thread that exists in every single building out any place? You know what it is? It's exit signs. And this little company makes really cool sensor packages. They can look at gas, they can look at alarms, they can look at sound, they have a little camera, and guess what? It can sit right inside here. And there's power there, and every organization out here has Wi-Fi. And they said, what if we could put this little piece of technology in every one of these manufacturers that sells signs? Now, if you're an investor, you're looking out there and going, wow, I found an opportunity on scaling. It's a government mission. We put together the pieces. This company now is being awarded contracts. They're currently rolling the product up, and they're bringing it to market. The issue is you had to have that intermediary in the middle to help move money to that seed company so that it had enough money to actually get a proof of concept, to actually get an MVP that an outside investor will say, I think I'm willing to put $500,000 or $1 million into, or $5 million into. And that's the way you bring innovation. It's a very, very hard, cool job, but for the government entities that are trying to solve really real world problems, they don't have a mechanism to go from their agency to, let's say it's Microsoft or CA or SAP or Oracle. Those guys are going to say, how am I going to make money? Okay, go do your thing, government. Find that hole in the middle. And that's what I do. And I've been doing this for nearly 40 years. So
Annamaria wants to jump in, but real quick. So when you talk about that hole in the middle, is that why we got things like GPS, why we got lithium-ion batteries? Because somebody found that hole in the middle.
Well, into GPS, when I was a young second lieutenant, we were putting the first 3 birds in the air. And we were literally going out there, and if you've ever seen the original roll-ups on GPS, they were 70-pound man packs that went on the back of guys' backs. Mm-hmm. And when Colonel Henderson said, I need to put 3 birds up there, and I need to put them at geosynchronous orbit, and we're going to have to wait to certain points in time, but I think if we put 24 of those suckers up with a secondary radius around the top, I can provide real-world access within the size of the ground. Those are the types of innovation that come out of there. And you have to think about the problem. Problem was, how do I know where I am any place in the world at any point in time in any weather condition so I can get people where they have to go, I can deliver packages, and I can deliver the government issue, but I take it from there. But it's a good example.
Annamaria.
So just jumping in, I think we're doing a lot of that, of hackathons, but not the traditional hackathons. We have, and Konstantin does it really well for health innovation, access for everyone on a low cost. And what we do, we're looking for industry partners, government partners, come to us, like the VA. What is your biggest problem you can't solve, but a lot of your veterans are facing this issue? Bring those to us, and we bring in all discipline from all schools and also alumni to GW and talk about it for 36 hours and come up 5, 6 different projects which could be rolled out either for a startup, a good idea for a startup, and let's prototype and then take it to the government or take it to the private sector and innovate on that. But it's a very good kind of ignition point for the government and the private sector to come into academia and tap into that brain, what the sophomores and freshmen are bringing in. But we forgot how to innovate get out from the box and think outside of the box. So that's something that we do a lot.
And actually, it's a great story. So I want to go to audience questions soon, but I'm going to give everyone 30 seconds or less, if you can do it in that time. Talk about a barrier that you've overcome or an incentive that you use. I think, Emery, that's a great example of an incentive to the VA to go to them and say, we're going to bring a group of people together that help solve a big problem. So if you want to begin again or go this side to Dan, and Dan, pick up.
I could jump into that one.
Incentive
the biggest
or
single barrier, and I'll give you 30 seconds. The biggest single barrier that we see is if government thinks of mission. You need to take that down to a business problem. People do not spend money on technology, flat out, in the commercial world. They will buy a product that solves a problem, okay? Get me your business problem in 3 seconds or less, okay? And if I can understand it, I can fund it, I can grow it, and I can pull the partners together for route to market, go to market. The problem, the biggest single problem is, on the government side, you don't think of it in terms of a business problem, you think of it as a mission problem, and that does not translate to the commercial side of the house. Big, big issue.
All right, Jim?
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different stab at this. I'm going to actually talk about the one barrier that I see in government. And again, it's not a State Department perspective, but one of the things that I struggle with is the fact that government has a hard time keeping up with industry. And one thing that we're not doing is creating centers of innovation in government. There are a few. But if you look at like senior executive positions, if you look for a chief innovation officer or an executive director for innovation and collaboration, those positions are few and far between. Government is not actually creating these structures that private sector has. You can walk across town here and Booz Allen has a gorgeous innovation lab. All these places have come up with really cool innovation spaces so that there is a place to go for innovation, for companies to figure out how to innovate. A Skunk Works organization that can go off and create a Kindle. Government doesn't do that, and we really need to start to invest in that, and government needs to think differently about how we approach innovation internally.
All right, so I got to jump in on this because the statistic I brought up was around FFRDCs, and I know that doesn't necessarily mean one-to-one for innovation, but the number of FFRDCs that are decreased over the years, is that an example maybe of what you're getting to, that there's this shift, a mind shift of innovation of, well, money's tighter, we have to spend more money on the mission side, and there's not this view of spending the time, the money, the resources, whatever it is.
Sorry, I know it's your
jump
question,
in, yeah.
but I'll just say I think that it's amazing that there's groups at GW and other universities. There's no dearth of folks that are excited about government problems. They realize the potential of government data sets and the scale of the market and all of that. But if you're a program manager in government going through, and this gets to your problem of you don't know where to go, if you're managing the day-to-day mechanics of a federal program, thinking about what it would take to actually be able to share your data or share, even just have a conversation with someone at a university, understanding the legal mechanisms for that are so complex. And you mentioned the FFRDC, it can feel like this overwhelming procurement process that you have to go through, and you have to justify and do a whole market research, and rightfully so. The spirit of all those laws are with good intention, but it's just hard to know what to do or what mechanisms to and we actually have a lot. There's Interpersonnel Act agreement, there's co-sponsorship agreements, there's challenge-based acquisition, there's the America Competes Act. There's actually all of these amazing mechanisms that we can use, but people managing programs just don't have the time to learn all of those, and there's very few people that can actually sit with you and help you think about what your problem is and say, okay, of these 18 options that are legally viable, this is the right path.
And that's why we need people internally to be able to help translate that and be able to help them along. And that's kind of what my office does at the State Department, but we're one of very few offices that even tries that.
And this actually brings up now, this may be a loaded question, so you'll forgive me, but are we talking about, do we need a community of practice? Do we need a Center for Innovation from the OMB level or GSA? I mean, or a playbook? We don't have enough playbooks. Do we need a new playbook?
Everyone has a playbook.
How do we get that message down to the program managers? I'm being facetious a little bit, but it's serious.
So part of it comes in training, but really what I think you need is leadership. sustained
Uh-oh, that's my
leadership. I'm
buzzword.
not doing the culture change, I know.
Buzz.
But honestly,
Culture change too?
if you don't have an office that is assigned, that can create the policies and help you do that translation that she's talking about, and help you figure out how to do your work differently, then you actually don't, it won't happen. Where we've seen public-private partnerships spike is anywhere you have someone is tagged with building public-private partnerships. So when an office stands up that does public-private partnerships, or a person stands up and says, I'm doing the public-private partnerships, more partnerships happen. Innovation, same thing.
All right, last. We're going to go to audience questions in a second. So, Amira, you get the last word of the
Okay.
obstacles or barriers.
Two things. I'm working with the Nordic governments, all 5 Nordic countries. 10, now maybe 12 years ago, they opened up all of data in Sweden and Denmark publicly available for anyone to use and do whatever you want to do with that data set. That is something that we should do. I encourage everyone, because a lot of innovation coming out from that. And I have to kind of side note, I never worked for the government, so I really appreciate what you're doing, because it was conscious not to work for them, because this is one of the most frustrating jobs I can imagine in my life. I was a serial entrepreneur. I worked in academia. I worked for IBM, so I know how it is. But one of the things what I think we need to do, more of getting people like me. I have 6 different backgrounds, and because of that, I feel you. I work for the United Nations as a consultant because I couldn't work as someone who is fully employed, because I couldn't, the barriers, the problems that you have, I don't know how to face that. But one of the points on that, how could we potentially go under the radar and have those sort of not public partnership where we investigating? Just have just some conversation, just have a cup of coffee and talk about it, and maybe that's how it starts.
I think there's a bunch of agencies that could hire you now if you're looking for that 7th career. Hold on, we're going to get to Arnies Questions. We got a bunch. There we go. Tell them who you are, please.
Good morning. This is MJ Matai from AttainX. We're a small business. I was traveling to Kansas City about 6-8 months back, and I found this bad element taking pictures of the airport at Washington Dulles. I wanted to complain to somebody, so I went to the counter, told somebody, I don't like this guy, he's the profile of this guy. That lady was so busy, she didn't do anything. So I was trying to call Washington Dulles police. The trooper at DC picked the phone and said, I don't have anybody to send and check it out. Finally found a TSA agent and then told them exactly the profile of this individual, and then told him that he got on a Terminal A and all the good stuff. That led me to believe that I should do something for crowdsourcing for tracking terrorism. We built an app called ICU, See Something, Say Something. And we went with Steve Cooper, the first CIO for DHS. Bill Pratt helped us get into DHS, and we presented this cool idea of tracking terrorist incidents and terrorist suspicious activities. And we got that prototype running. But it's an innovative product, helps with crowdsourcing for terrorism. We don't know where to go next, because we went to DHS. They said, there is no revenue model for us on this one. And how do we offer this as a service? So we are stuck, and any advice would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to jump on that for a second. I know of several companies that are in the, I'll call it the gaming SaaS / crowdsourcing mode, that are kind of playing in your space. The key that you have to understand is who else besides DHS might be interested in buying that. And there is a larger community that sits within this, I'll call it the alerting models. And gaming models actually feel really nicely into that. And you get players out there that pull information in. Things like university police and security organizations, a lot of organizations that are local municipal police areas that are trying to manage their own area. I think about the market, and sometimes trying to get to the big guy is really hard. But if you look like Liberty University, in fact, in the state of Virginia, is really active in the areas of crowdsourcing, gaming, threat, and I'll call it shooter environments. Think about the market, think about who the buyers are, and I think you will see a different model, and it may be easier to come in under the radar and talk to them, and they've got money to spend in that particular type of solution that you're talking about.
And let's just pull that onion on that for a second. If someone has an innovative idea, Jim or Amira or Anne-Marie, what should they do if they can't figure out where to go? I mean, Jim, do you meet with vendors? Do you meet with ideas? Or are you really focused on problems within state that then you bring people in? What's the push and pull?
You go to a gear center.
Go to a gear center when they're up. We're a little further away.
I would recommend to try to find a customer who has the least resistance. Many times, when I was an entrepreneur, I felt like I went to people. For example, I'll give you an example. In my first venture, I went to 54 venture capitalists to fund my idea. No one wanted to. So I found my first customer getting a cup of coffee in Menlo Park. The guy was behind me. I started to talk about what I'm doing. He's like, I have a small business. I can use this. Can you give it to me for free for 3 months? That's how it started. So talk and tell people.
All right, another question here. Tell me.
So my name's Lauren Fishburne. I'm from Cisco. And one of the things that we think about a lot is how do we get individuals to own their idea through the process? Because a lot of times it can feel to an idea owner or to an entrepreneur like they're throwing their idea over the fence to the government. Can you guys talk a little bit about anything that you've done in your agencies or university or company to promote that ownership and help the idea owner stay engaged?
I can jump in there. Just saying, in my center, we don't encourage entrepreneurship and create a startup. We encourage you to do a project what makes a difference. As soon as you raise that idea, you are the owner, and you report back to me, and you're meeting with me once a week. And you have to tell me what you did. Did you have a new teammate? Did you talk to this? So that kind of makes them, without knowing they're the owners, they just taking it and driving that process.
I think you have two challenges. Are you Cisco California or Cisco the food delivery? Okay, and it makes a big difference because I know the management team on both sides. But if you are working for a company, the company owns the IP that you create. Ideally, if you're in the area, you will start to work and you'll find people who are sponsors within your product development teams, and you go to them. And you may get credit for, especially if it's patentable, and Cisco is really good about that. I know the guys really well. If you come up with some really great ideas and you talk to the people out there within that product side, they go, that's really cool. I wonder if this is patentable. They will give you the patent, but they will own the intellectual property. And it's something you just have to understand within that structure. And companies within product management groups and R&D groups sponsor various, I'll call it almost town halls within the product centers to talk about new ideas to either evolve the product or go into next generation. Then they will typically hand it off to the marketing team to do a market sizing analysis, and then they will look at it over time. And the reason I bring that into it, Cisco is really, I'll call it a 3-year or 5-year window on the development models, sometimes farther. Intel works at 25 years out. So if you're thinking in those models, you're truly thinking way out there, and the company really sponsors you in those particular areas. Just as something to think about.
So I'm going to jump in on this as well, because my brain has gone in like 6 different directions since I've heard you speak. So one of the things that we do with our accelerator, so ideas come in, we actually follow up with all those organizations. We have touch points, and I'm going to point out my colleague CJ, stand up, wave. CJ here manages the Bold Line Accelerator for us at the State Department, and she is on regular calls with all the companies who have come through our accelerator and our account managers. Government sets up account managers with all of these organizations so that we have some follow-up with them. But what I'm going to ask you to do from like a Cisco perspective is look for opportunities where the government is asking questions and looking for innovation research. So you should be regularly on challenge.gov. Seeing what's out there. And coming back to this question that was asked earlier about app development, come in sideways. You never know. You may just want to build those relationships and those partnerships by doing something else and then expanding those relationships. Look for innovation days, look at what the SBIRs are doing, try to find a way in that might not be traditional. And there are, and this did not come from me, so none of you heard it in here, but legislation has a way of getting attention in federal government agencies. So sometimes we have processes that need to be updated, like, I don't know, consular affairs, visa stamping processes. We still send foreign service officers overseas every post has foreign service officers who stamp visas. That's their first job as a foreign service officer, is 2 years working that visa window. Think about what technology could do in that space. I don't know, Cisco, you guys have something called, what's it, telepresence? You want to talk about bringing jobs back to the United States? We could have a visa center somewhere in the United States that could service multiple posts. Language training could be done for our foreign service officers. They could still be doing their languages, but we don't need to send foreign service officers at $500,000, $600,000 a pop overseas to be stamping visas if it can be worked through a telepresence. First point of entry is a screen that people see as opposed to a person.
Austria has McDonald's doing that right now.
Right.
That's the new thing.
If you're familiar with the Foundations for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act of 2018, it has passed, and it's requiring all agencies to develop a learning agenda. And I think that there's like a taste of evaluation heavily in that, and so people might think automatically like, oh, those learning agendas are meant to be used kind of by the whole market of evaluation firms. But I think that those learning agendas where agencies are asking priority questions about, you know, long-term and short-term questions about how to manage their programs or how they're measuring whether or not they're achieving their missions, that can be a call to also the private sector and, you know, new technology that they might need. Or
And I think really good, I'm going to spin on that for just one quick second. Most of the big players, whether it's Cisco, Microsoft, Intel, they have, I'm going to call it not innovation centers, but I'll call it offices or centers of the future. And they bring people in, they have all sorts of incredible things. And I know when I was on active duty, I used to go and visit them, and I would come out going, holy mackerel, this is really cool. How can we apply this? I think you need to take advantage, from the government perspective, of those technology visible centers that are not looking in the here, they're looking out here someplace, and it will spark innovative thoughts. And that, well, especially at Cisco, I've been to your facilities out there so many times. I ran global alliances, and I had SAP, Oracle, Dell, Cisco, well, Dell was my primary, Microsoft, Intel, Salesforce. These people are thinking way out there, and they're looking for people that will say, I have this really cool technology. Could you use it? Would you like to pilot it? Think outside the box. It is so cool when you start playing outside the box, because these guys are spending, you know, 5% or 10% or 20% of their total R&D budget on next generation stuff that you guys don't even know exist.
So let me get another question here, but real quick. One of the things that the government has a challenge with, and we see this all the time, is this idea of, hey, when you have a challenge.gov and you want to get the word out, get the word out. And this is very selfish on my end, but I think that what the challenge is you want to reach a broader audience. You want to reach some of the folks that are we'll call them the usual suspects, but they're doing all this innovative work that if they don't really know what's happening. And so I would encourage Jim and Amira specifically to do what you can to push more stuff to the press. Question.
Avi Bender, Director of NTIS, a federal agency within the government. A common theme that I'm hearing from all of you is conversation and problem statement, right? Feds usually are the ones creating the problem statement. How can the private sector be better engaged in having that conversation to actually craft problem statements as opposed to addressing problem statements by the government?
So I'm excited about this question because I think this is the future of procurement. So I'd said I've been involved in government. I've actually been in government for 28 years. I started off my career as a contracting officer. We've all talked about thinking outside the box. Sometimes you just actually have to know the box.
The box, yeah.
There's a lot of room in the box.
Yeah.
Having people who are trained in procurement
Yeah.
operating in different environments is actually really helpful. So your question, what we've done is started using a co-creation process, which actually is the problem statement. So I think it's currently on the street. I'm looking for Marcus. Marcus, where are you? I know you're here. There you are. We have a challenge out right now. It's actually a statement of interest and capacity. We're looking at counterterrorism finance. And we're looking for new ideas about how do we work on countering terrorism financing. What we're looking for are great organizations that can help us solve this problem. What we're going to have them do, though, is come in. We're going to select from all the organizations that apply. We're going to have them come in, and then we're going to sit down with them and co-create their approach to the business problem. So this is government done differently. Then those who were selected and have gone through the co-creation process, then we issue them the RFP, or the RF, and in this case it's going to be a NOFO, a Notice of Federal Opportunity, and only those organizations that participated can bid, and then their proposals are really informed better by government, but then our thinking has also been informed by them. So our solicitation's been informed by them. So it really is a co-creation process. It's a new way of looking at procurement. That, as
And
a
you didn't have
procurement
to- you
geek,
didn't have to break
excites me.
anything.
I didn't have to break anything. It's not using other transaction authority. It's just a different way of approaching the problem set.
I think the next part of that follow-on, and I think this is a part that gets missed a lot of times. I'm out here on the commercial side. I want to see a product or technology that has the potential to scale, okay? And most organizations, especially innovative groups, have a tendency to think in project orientation. And it's exceedingly difficult to go from a project to a product that is scalable. So you have to start thinking about what is the problem, what is the business problem, who else has that business problem, which is important to put that dimensionally. If you were to say state and Air Force and transportation and HUD all have the same problem, now you have the attention of the guys out here going, oh wow, if I build this cool thing, I can sell it to this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. I've got a cookie cutter. That's the only way you get the guys out here on the backside, and you take that technology. So think of it in terms of, who else partnering? Who else has this problem? Because when you take who else has that problem and you put them together, you create a partnership that drives ongoing scalable revenue. And that has to be part of the thought, which it traditionally has not operated well within government structures, because the government, unfortunately, like most big companies, is highly siloed. Yeah. And that silo has a tendency, even though we say we're innovative, we don't do the cross-sharing that exists across government agencies to the innovative model.
Okay, got a question back here.
Hi, thank you guys for all your comments. They're, oh, by the way, I'm Jackie Everett with Leidos. They're really, I've got 1,000 things and we only have a few minutes. So I think of innovation on multi-tiers, right? And we've been talking a lot, I hear technology innovations, right? But there's process innovations, there's how we do work innovations, right? There's business models like the Gear's looking at, right? And Canada and the UK and everybody else and New Zealand have done those models, right? Mm-hmm. But behind all those models are some financial aspects that we in America look at as corporations, right? As to how do we, it's like what Don was talking, how do I scale and how do we do these things? So when I look across the stuff, I think, the problem statement is, can we work differently and can we implement this legislation in a way to take advantage of the stuff that's out there today just to make it quicker, faster, safer, easier, whatever we're trying to do. I don't know that problem statement, but I see a lot of great innovation, but I feel like we're in the weeds and we're down at all these little places in the forest instead of the forest as a whole as to what is our government going to be like 5 to 10 to 15 years from now. What do the employees look like, and how do we serve the citizens in a digital format so that I have like an Amazon retail experience? I tell my staff this all the time, they get tired of hearing it, but that is how I want to interface with the government because that's how I interface everywhere else. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested in your comments on that.
I think you nailed it. I mean, that you described the problem statement of the Gear Center of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to convene. And you're absolutely right. People expect, this kind of speaks to the customer experience piece of this, but people expect their government and their interactions with their government to look like all their other interactions with entities. And so we need to be better at thinking about that. And because, we're thinking siloed within the agency itself, we're thinking about like the CIO shop and we're thinking about the program office and we're thinking about HR. We're not actually thinking about how is our backstage process affecting our customer experience. And, people experience life events, not federal agencies. So, an international traveler doesn't care that, DHS does global entry and that the State Department gives them their passport. They want to go abroad and then go through a CBP checkpoint faster. And so we're trying to convene agencies to be thinking about together. How are we planning how are we delivering our services for an experience that someone has, not, the way our statutory mission is written.
How many people are doing customer experience in government?
not as many, as same as innovation maybe.
Yeah.
So
This is a problem. We're
Yeah.
not really thinking this way. We
Yeah.
need to actually start thinking differently about the way the private sector works.
Actually, this goes back to something Anne-Marie said earlier on, when the students connected the DC government
Yeah.
homelessness, DC government physical mental health, and then brought them together. And that's the people who are homeless, who are suffering obviously with cancer, they didn't care where they got the services from, they just need the services. So maybe Anne-Marie, jump in here a little bit about, you talk about the connections a little bit. You've had other examples where there's been connections between maybe government agencies or public-private sector?
Yeah, so many times, and stop me when I talk too long, but many times you feel that you have a problem, we have that problem, and I'll give you an example. 2 years ago, we received the problem, rats in DC. All of us seeing the rats, right? We have more than enough, and what are we gonna do? We are number 5 in the nation. So DC government, as the customer, comes to us saying, hey, what can you do about it? So we thought the problem and the problem statement coming from DC government, obviously that's their problem. After 3 weeks, we realized it's not their problem. It goes back to the restaurants. The restaurant problem goes back to trash. The trash problem goes back to the kitchen. And surprisingly enough, not the customer, you and I, who go and eat and we have leftover and send it back. That's not the problem. How they prepare the food and how the people who prepare the food educated, that is the biggest problem, because 30% of the food waste are coming from preparation of food. So for example, chopping off the top of the carrot in too much or too kind of wastefully. I know you want me to shut up.
She was telling me it was 5 minutes.
Yes. Yeah, but the point is, when you think you're the customer, look around who else could be the customer and do it together.
And real quick, you solved the DC government, you helped the DC government solve the problem by just training the kitchen staff.
Exactly. So basically, just a quick story on that. We came up with, actually the students came up with a software proposal which shows the people how to prepare the food and what to do with the leftover. And if you do it correctly, you have a financial incentive. So if you have less than 10% waste, you're gonna get extra $5 per hour. So that's a good one, win-win for everyone.
All right, we have another question.
So I'm Mike Howell with ACT. Partnership, public-private partnership barrier question. We hear about all of the iteration, trial, fast learning. I hate fail fast. I like learn fast. And can you talk a little about, there's this famous old story about Thomas Edison had to go through over 1,000 trials to invent a working filament for a light bulb. And he was interviewed, and they said, well, how could you keep doing this and fail 1,000 times? And he said, I never failed. I had 1,000 steps to success. In the government, there doesn't seem to be an environment or an appetite to let that happen. How can trial and error and fast learning practices from the private sector happen in the government?
I'll just say that my team at GSA, I mentioned earlier, we try and do randomized controlled trials for everything that we, whenever we implement a new intervention. And I think doing it first with, an aspect of program implementation is making it more comfortable for folks before you're going and actually evaluating whether or not the program is working. And so for us, it's been really, we've seen agencies be more willing to answer more, ask scarier questions after they've done it a couple of times with less scary questions, and seeing that we can learn and adjust and learn from our implementation itself before you're asking a program of a question of is this program working?
Mike, I love this question too, and it's hard in government. I want to jump immediately to leadership. They got to set that base. But I've seen some really cool stuff that's being done. So like National Geospatial Administration had a big procurement failure. Since when government fails, we love to fail big. They had a systems issue. This is the agency that puts all the satellites in the sky and that has all this great data of what's happening on the ground, and that can show all incredible stuff. But they actually were having a problem displaying that for their teams. Like how do you take all that information and use it in a display? And that was the system that failed for them. So they were back rewriting their scope of work and trying to get redo it again. And then they realized, wow, we're writing basically the same thing that we wrote before that failed. How do we do this differently? And they actually did a hackathon. They did a 2-stage hackathon and a procurement process to help them define their scope better and to see what technology was out there that would enable them to approach the problem set differently. And that's the future of procurement. It's bringing people in from the outside and helping them inform the statement of work process. And that's why I love this co-creation model that we are doing, that USAID is doing. And really, there's not a lot else in government that's happening on that space, but these are the models that we want to promote.
Hey, Dan, jump in, because there's this theory that the private sector is okay if you fail, and if you fail fast, and there's this big appetite for failure in the private sector. And my impression is at a place like Google, Microsoft, or Oracle, or SAP, or Salesforce, or Amazon, that's maybe the case. But in the investment world, right, is fast failure, that's someone's money. And is there still that appetite? Is it any different than from your experience in government?
Yeah, I mean, there were two parts of that. In the investment world, the most important thing that you have is time. Okay, money's easy. Time is your killer. And you have time to market. You've got time to product fit. You've got time, and the longer it stretches out, the more money you're going to have to put in the thing. Okay, so the question from an investor standpoint on early stage companies is, show me progress. We expect 1.5 pivots per year in products for the growth models, because we know it's going to change. But if you're not growing within the money number, you're going to be taken out. And you will find that when we do a board meeting with our small companies, we'll say, what is it you say you were going to do, and how come you're this much off? We're going to make a change. You're now the CEO, okay? Because we can't tolerate
Actually,
change.
he is the CEO now. That's kind of funny.
We can't tolerate, yeah, we can't tolerate the pain, okay? But when you're in the product side of the house and you're building, back in the 1960s, there was a gentleman by the name of Ev Rogers. He's really the father of innovation theory. And if you've never looked at the work of Ev Rogers, you probably should. There are 9 components of change. They go from training, they go from other, there are 9 components in there. When you start looking at the components of change, one of the areas is phased evaluation. Okay, set realistic expectations, make sure everybody is on the same page on the expectations, and build to the expectations. Don't set unrealistic expectations, because you're going to go, nobody's going to make them. So understand your phase model, and that's kind of your question back here.
Yeah, I think that's a more eloquent way of I was trying to say, like, government has to get comfortable with failing little first,
Yeah.
and then and being transparent about it, because then you'll build up trust to be able to do the bigger,
Yep.
ask scarier questions.
So when we talk about the Gear Center, and I know you're just getting started, so this may be a harder question to answer, but are you guys trying to set yourself up the way that Dan explained it, in terms of like the small expectation and then build on that?
Yeah, we looked at all of the different procurement mechanisms and agreements that are out there to think about how to establish a gear center, and really realized that before we go all in on something, we should be piloting this first. And so that's why we have a competition out right now to try and test the solutions that a gear center could deliver, because a lot of people are already out there doing these really innovative partnerships or developing technologies that would be useful to government. And so we're trying to do small scale first. Just show us what you're already doing, and we want to reward that so you can continue to do it, or kind of tweak it a little bit so it's more relevant for the federal government. And then we can go all in on building out an actual model through some, whatever mechanisms appropriate.
One quick, and I'm going to jump off of it. Back in the late 1970s, 1980s, procurement was based purely on lowest cost. Whatever it is, the lowest cost you're going to buy at, I don't care. In 1981, a team of us started to take on the technology model that says we're going to base the acquisition based upon ease of use. Ease of use is based upon the workers helping to define what it is we want to do. And we literally defined the scope of the thing we were going to do based upon work. When we went through the acquisition, we had to go through 2.5 years of getting GSA finally to approve a model that the acquisition was based upon ease of use of the technology. At that point in time, people were looking at computer technology and saying, We don't know how long it's going to live. Maybe 60 months. Okay, God, if the technology lives 60 months, that would be great. But what we did is we acquired the first round of technology for distributed technology in the Pentagon. 8 years later, the big Unix server that was running Air Force L&L, they were still using way beyond the lifespan. And the users were going, the reason we love it, it does our work for us. Okay, we innovated to that area. We brought the users involved in the process. We validated the process. We saved a massive amount of money, huge amount of money, and then deployed technology that lived way beyond the lifespan of what people thought. So if I walk away with one thing, get your users involved, understand the problem, make informed decisions, do it phased operations.
Okay. There we go.
How you doing? Colin Dunn with Fend. We secure smart infrastructure from cyber attack and ransomware. And we've been fortunate enough to get a grant from the Department of Energy and an SBIR program, and I've been encouraging my peers, other CEOs of startups, to say, hey, you've got some really great product, the government would love this. And they see the contract language, and there's bits in these challenges and other programs that say the government shall have a perpetual license for all time, and they don't know what it means, and they don't have enough money to hire a lawyer that knows what it means, and they say, I'm just going to deal with the commercial sector. I can't give away my technology to the government and have them perhaps give it to somebody who can do it for a lower price. So there's some confusion around it, and I didn't know if you'd made any progress in maybe changing the language of this for some of these outcomes so that people aren't afraid that they're going to be giving away their innovation to somebody else.
All right, we don't really have acquisition experts on here, but I don't know if, Jim, you want to jump on that in a broader perspective and offer some, how does the State Department deal with that issue of, hey, I'm bringing you challenge.gov, my IP, how do we work that out?
So it needs to be thought up out front. I mean, when you're doing the procurement process, you need to be thinking about who owns that intellectual property. Trust me, we've made this mistake. I made this mistake with our hackathon. We made our hackathon open source, which sounded really good. You know, we're government, we don't know any better. Open source, yeah, everyone has access to it. Yeah, and then no one actually followed through and developed any of the apps because, you know, we're a capitalist society. Someone wants to make a profit on it, and if it's open source, they're not making any money on it. So we changed it. We actually did update the hackathon to let people keep their own intellectual property, but it was a design flaw, and then we corrected it. But that is like a training issue that then needs to be addressed within the Federal Acquisition Institute. We need to be talking with Mike Howe back there about or the Gear Center about how do we look at intellectual property in a way that really incentivizes people to do the work that they're doing and make sure that they keep their own intellectual property. It's a tough one to do, but through training, through articles being written, I mean, those types of things move government along.
Well, and I think that follows along. Many large corporations have technology transfer programs. And they can be good or bad, but you need to be able to understand who the potential partners are, and negotiate in good faith for the technology. And don't become greedy. I've been involved with a lot of technology transfer projects where we've had companies come in. And thank goodness several of us were part of the negotiations and said, look, don't get greedy. We're going to solve a problem. We're going to do something this way. It can be done. But if you don't understand TI and you don't understand technology transfers and you don't understand the pieces around it, you're going to get caught crosswise, and then the entrepreneur is going to be hurt, and the corporations are going to be hurt. So negotiate up front, get a good lawyer behind you, have a good discussion about it, make sure it's trained well, and then make sure you're solving business problems that the company that you're getting the intellectual property with understands where you're going. Complex, can be done. DHS had a big problem not too long ago because they had a great program that Michael Posmentier did, and he went to all the national labs, and they were showing all these really great things, but they never talked about the business problem they're solving. And the underlying technology transfer components of pulling stuff out of the national labs was like, oh my God, okay? And they never had any successes, but they have incredible technology. So you have to think through those processes dynamically with government agencies to be able to bring that technology to market.
All right, that's a great place to end it. I think a very positive note, gives you guys something to think about. So first of all, let's thank our panelists. They did a great job. Thank you guys for being a good audience and participating. It made my job obviously easy. And I'm going to turn it back over to somebody. Judy, no. Olivia, no.
Just start naming names. Somebody will come up.
Somebody will come up.
So thanks again to our panelists. It was great to hear from all of them about how you can put innovation to work in your organization. So we're going to say this again. Remember to vote for the top 8 best finalists on that mobile app that you guys have all downloaded by now, hopefully, or quickly get out your phones and download, or your laptops by noon. Your votes are going to determine which exhibitors in there will advance to the final round of competition. At 1 p.m., the presentations by the top 8 finalists selected by your votes will begin to compete for the coveted Igniting Innovation Award. You will get to vote one more time to select the overall winner for one of those beautiful awards over there, so make sure you come back in time for the exciting part of the program. And at 2 p.m., we will hear from our 2 keynote speakers. Now over to you, Austin.
Thank you, Olivia. So I guess that there is a sponsored lunch, but it's not going to be entirely free because we do want to invite all of you to participate in the collaboration session at lunch at 11:30 at those round tables where those gentlemen, that gentleman and that lady are sitting back there anxiously waiting to join in the conversation. We're going to discuss innovation in the 3 top CAP goals, IT modernization, modernizing the workforce, and data as a strategic asset. So if you want to meet some of your colleagues from different sectors, participate in the discussions, and then we'll summarize those. There'll be a facilitator at each table and provide them to the government, because when we want you to roll up your sleeves, we want to hear your ideas and be able to share them. So please join us from 11:30 after you grab your lunch at those back round tables. Thank you very much.